After volunteering for a cryogenic experiment, a biomedical engineer awakens 2 centuries later to a world ruled by alien conquerors and stripped of its past. As the last living witness to humanity's forgotten history, he's forced to choose between survival and remembrance, discovering that memory itself may be the most dangerous weapon left. The hum of machinery filled the sterile chamber like the low murmur of an approaching storm. Fluorescent lights glowed coldly against steel walls, casting long reflections across the cryogenic pods that lined the facility's core. Each one represented a promise, a gamble on immortality, and at the center of it all stood Chris, a 35-year-old biomedical engineer with tired eyes and a heart still bruised by loss. He pressed his hand against the smooth, frost glass shell of the pod labeled Elysium-1. Its surface shimmered faintly under the sterile light. To the scientists in white coats bustling around him, this was history in the making, the first successful attempt to preserve human life indefinitely. But for Chris, it was something far more personal. 2 years had passed since his wife Lena succumbed to cancer. He had watched her fade day by day as the machines meant to preserve her instead documented her decline. Her final words, "Don't stop trying," echoed endlessly in his mind. When the opportunity came to volunteer for Project Elysium, he didn't hesitate. Perhaps he thought if cryogenics could preserve him long enough, one day there would be a way to bring people like Lena back. He wasn't just doing this for science, he was doing it for her, and for anyone who'd ever wished for more time. As he lay inside the pod, cold mist curling around him, Chris tried to steady his breath. The lead scientist, Dr. Wynn, leaned over the interface, voice calm through the intercom. Cryogenic sequence initiated, temperature descending to -196 Celsius, neural link synchronization in progress. His vision began to fade, the frost creeping across the glass. He whispered one last thought before the freezing overtook him. Maybe this is how I find her again. And then, silence. Months later, the skies above Earth cracked open. From orbit descended ships unlike anything humanity had conceived. Enormous vessels wreathed in blue light, bearing the insignia of a species that would soon be known as the Valari. They came not as diplomats, but as conquerors, wielding energy-based technology that rendered human weapons obsolete. In less than a decade, entire nations fell. The Valari seized control of global power grids and communication networks, dismantling resistance with precise, surgical strikes. When the global EMP hit, it was over. Power vanished in an instant. Satellites blinked out like dying stars. Planes fell from the sky. Cities burned. The world Chris knew dissolved into chaos and darkness. Deep underground, the Elysium facility went silent. Power surges destroyed its monitoring systems, sealing its cryogenic subjects in perpetual stillness. Scientists fled in desperation, leaving behind their frozen pioneers. Only one pod, the prototype, remained functional, its nitrogen reserves feeding off the emergency backup systems. Inside, Chris slept through the death of the civilization. 200 years passed. When the last of reserves drained, Elysium-01 stirred. Red warning lights pulsed as ancient machinery grown back to life. Warmth spread through Chris's veins, oxygen flooding his lungs. He gasped violently, the air tasting of metal and decay. Coughing, he stumbled from the pod, surrounded by silence and the ghost of a bygone age. The facility was a tomb, cracked walls, flickering lights, consoles covered in dust. His alarms wailed weakly. Chris staggered down the corridor, searching for anyone, anything. The control monitors told him what his heart couldn't yet believe. The date, June 14th, 2242. He had slept for 2 centuries. When he finally forced open the exit hatch, a blast of humid air hit his face. The world beyond, soft and cold. Chicago, his city, was gone, buried beneath alien architecture and force fields that shimmered like liquid glass. Towering spires of blue metal rose where skyscrapers once stood. Strange aerial crafts drifted through the orange sky. And in the distance, where the flag once flew over the ruins of Millennium Park, he saw them, humans, walking in single-file lines beneath Valari sentinels that hovered like gods. Chris took one unsteady step forward, his breath fogging in the warm air. The age of man had ended, and his nightmare, a frozen dream, had only just begun. The wind that swept through the city was dry and metallic, carrying the faint hum of alien machinery. Chris stood among the ruins of what had once been downtown Chicago, though it barely resembled the city he remembered. The skyline was now a skeleton of steel and light, alien towers spiraling upward like frozen lightning, their surfaces pulsing with faint energy. Between them, shattered remnants of human architecture clung to the ground, like fossils of another era. He moved slowly, his legs still weak from 2 centuries of cross-sleep. The streets were cracked and overgrown, their pavement carved with symbols he didn't recognize. Above, glowing Volari drones drifted soundlessly, scanning the ground with thin beams of blue light. He ducked into an alley, heart hammering, watching as one passed overhead. The sound of its thrusters made his skin crawl. Its presence felt less like surveillance, and more like judgment. As days passed, Chris pieced together fragments of the world he'd awakened into. The city had been divided into containment zones, each encased in shimmering energy barriers that pulsed like veins. Humans lived within these zones under strict alien control. They worked, they ate, they obeyed. Rations were distributed at designated intervals from stations guarded by mechanical sentinels. Education was forbidden. History was rewritten. The Volari called it the Age of Harmony, a new order forged from chaos. Through graffiti etched into the walls, half hidden, written in haste, Chris began to glimpse defiance. We were more once, before harmony. There was freedom. These words burned into his mind. In the hushed marketplaces, he caught whispers from the old and weary, how the Volari had wiped clean every record of theirs past, every book, song, and name that dared to remind humanity it had ever been more than subservient. The young no longer knew the word nation. They spoke of the Volari as saviors, not conquerors. Each discovery hauled Chris further. The world that had dreamed of extending life had lost the meaning of living. His life's work, the pursuit of human endurance, had outlived humanity's spirit. One night, while slipping through the outskirts of a containment district, Chris heard movement behind him, a faint scuffle, then a whisper. "Don't run." He turned to see a woman aiming a makeshift crossbow. She was lean, her face streaked with grime, her eyes sharp with both suspicion and exhaustion. Her name was Rhea, leader of a small resistance cell, operating from beneath the city's abandoned subway lines. The group scavenged relics of the old world, books, fragments of code, pieces of broken technology, and tried to piece together what humanity had been before the Volari rewrote everything. When Chris told him his story, the cryogenic experiment, the centuries of sleep, the moment he awoke to find the world transformed, they stared in stunned silence. A boy with a scar across his cheek whispered, "The sleeper." Another murmured, "It returned." To them, Chris was not merely a survivor. It was a relic of the truth the Volari had stolen. Rumors spread through the containment sectors like wildfire. People began to whisper his name as it queued for rations, as they huddled in secret meetings by candlelight. The man from before the fall has awoken. He remembers the real world. He will show us how to be free again. Chris tried to deny it. "I'm no leader," he insisted. "I'm just a man who made a mistake and slept too long." But even as he said it, he saw the change in their eyes, the flicker of something rare and dangerous. Belief. In a world where history had been erased, even a single living memory could ignite rebellion. And as Chris looked at the faces of those who now followed him, he realized something he hadn't since the day Lena died. That hope, fragile and fleeting, was still alive. The tunnels beneath Chicago had become a heartbeat, a pulse that grew louder each night. Chris stood beside Rhea in the flickering glow of salvaged lamps, watching as clusters of humans crowded around makeshift tables. Maps drawn on scraps of fabric, blueprints carved into metal sheets, and crude weapons lined the walls. The air buzzed with attention that felt alive. For the first time in generations, people were daring to imagine more than survival. Chris had always been an engineer, a builder. Now he built again, but this time, not for preservation, but defiance. Using fragments of old world machinery, he guided the resistance in creating crude but ingenious tools, signal jammers forged from scavenged drone parts, EMP grenades small enough to fit in a satchel, and radio transmitters powered by car batteries. Every successful test filled the air with murmurs of awe. He taught them what had been forgotten, how to improvise, how to question, how to believe. Freedom, he told them one night, his voice carrying through the tunnels, isn't given, it's remembered, and memory is the one weapon they can't erase unless we surrender it. That line spread through the zones like wildfire. The people began to call themselves the Restoration, a name that carried both defiance and dignity. But rebellion draws eyes, and the Volari overseers, crystalline beings that shimmered with refracted light, began to sense the disturbance. They moved like specters through the human sectors, their telepathic commands bending weaker minds to obedience. Drones hovered above city streets, scanning crowds for signs of agitation. When the first suspected rebels were dragged into the squares and executed, the message was clear. Hope was treason. The Valari's cruelty backfired. Every death sparked 10 new believers. The more they tightened control, the more the restoration spread, through whispers, coded signals, and secret songs. Chris watched it grow with both pride and dread. The responsibility weighed heavily on him. He hadn't sought to be a savior. He only wanted to understand what had happened to the world. His world. Yet every word he spoke became a creed. Children recited his phrases like prayers. Elders looked at him with reverence. He saw in their eyes the reflection of faith, something he wasn't sure he deserved. At night, sleep offered no peace. His dreams were haunted by Lena, her face, as he remembered, luminous and still. Sometimes she stood in the snow of a long-lost Chicago street, whispering, "Don't let them take what we were." Other times she reached for him from behind a sheet of ice, her fingers frozen, in motion. He began to wonder if his awakening had truly been accidental, that something or someone preserved him deliberately, a design beyond science. The thought both comforted and terrified him. Rhea noticed his growing fatigue. "You can't carry this alone," she said one night, as they stood before the old subway platform that now served as their command post. Chris smiled wearily. "I'm not carrying it. They are. I'm just reminding them why it matters." The uprising was set for the anniversary of the Valari conquest, the day the skies turned blue with alien fire. Across the containment zones, resistance cells prepared in secret, their radios tuned into a single frequency. When the signal came, every human ear would hear the same voice, but not a command, not a sermon, but a promise. Humanity's story will not be erased. The spark had become a flame. The restoration was no longer just rebellion, it was resurrection. And as Chris looked upon the flickering lights of the city that had once been his home, he knew the next act would decide whether humanity would rise again or be silenced forever. The world erupted in fire. From the shattered edges of the old continents to the luminous towers of alien rule, the restoration rose like a storm. Chris's voice, broadcast through hacked frequencies and hijacked drones, echoed across the containment zones. "You were not born to kneel." It was a sentence that split the sky. For the first time in 2 centuries, humanity remembered what defiance sounded like. Factories once forced to refine alien energy became fortresses. Rhea's engineers learned to channel the Valari's crystalline fuel into unstable weapon cores, and scavengers turned mining lasers into rifles that could pierce even a sentinel's armor. Chris guided them as best he could, his old world expertise bridging the lost centuries. He became the strategist of a species relearning how to stand. A rebellion never rises without blood. The Valari descended from their citadels, towering crystalline beams wreathed in white fire, their armor humming with the resonance of alien thought. Entire districts vanished under plasma bombardment, cities burned in unnatural hues, humans fled into tunnels as their skies ignited. Still, even as the Valari unleashed devastation, the message continued to spread. The radio signals were impossible to silence now. It was in the ashes of one such battle that Chris was captured. He was bound by luminous restraints within a chamber of living glass, the air vibrating with alien whispers. Before him loomed the high Valari console, his form translucent and fluid, his face an ever-shifting prism of light. "You are a relic," it said, its telepathic voice reverberating inside his skull, "a remnant of a failed species. You claw at chaos because you cannot comprehend order. You perfected what you could not." Chris, bloodied but defiant, met its gaze. "Control is imperfection," he rasped. "It's rot. You've built eternity out of fear, and even your own soldiers can smell the decay." For a flicker of a moment, he saw hesitation ripple through the alien guards, a fracture in their unity, doubt, the smallest spark. Then the walls trembled, explosions rippled through the citadel as Rhea and her strike team breached the upper levels in stolen energy suits, their movement streaks of blue light against the crystalline corridors. Over the radio came her voice, steady but burning. "We're coming, Chris. Hold on." The console turned toward the chaos. "They cannot undo what we have shaped." But Chris smiled the restraints. "They already have." Hidden within his restraints was a compact device, the EMP disruptor, a culmination of everything he had learned from both human ingenuity and alien arrogance. He had designed it both as a weapon and message. It pulsed in his palm, warm and alive. When he activated it, the lights followed everything. A thunderclap of energy surged outward, rippling through every network in Sky Citadel. The Valari screamed, not in pain, but in silence, as their neural systems shattered. Across the world, force fields collapsed, towers felt dark, drones plummeted from the heavens like burning stars. And for the first time in 200 years, the night sky was unfiltered, vast, raw, and filled with starlight. But freedom carried a heavy price. The EMP didn't distinguish between conqueror and captive. Power grids failed. The Restoration Communications Network fell silent. Entire cities plunged into chaos. Yet amid the collapse, humanity breathed. Rhea found Chris amidst the wreckage of the console's chamber, half buried under shards of alien glass. He looked up at her, a faint smile on his bruised face. "We did it," he whispered. The citadel groaned above them, collapsing in cascades of light. Together, they stumbled into the dawn painted not by alien suns, but by the first rays of an unchained earth. The Valari's empire had fallen, and though the world teetered on the brink of ruin, humanity once again looked to the stars, not as slaves, but as dreamers. Months after the revolution, Earth was unrecognizable, not in the alien image that had once defined it, but in the fragile and perfect beauty of rebirth. The Valari were gone, their ships, once radiant across the heavens, now lay scattered as husks on the edges of ruined cities. Power grids sparked back to life through human hands, not alien code. Fires burned not from war, but from warmth. Campfires in streets where families gathered and told stories again. Chris walked those streets every day, moving to the heart of what had once been Chicago. The towers that still stood were scarred, alive with new color, murals of defiance, art painted on rubble. The people called this the city of renewal. To them, it was proof that humanity could outlast extinction. For Chris, it was something simpler, proof that even the coldest world could thaw. He refused the titles they tried to give him: the Unfrozen, the Restorer, the First Free Man. He saw the danger in hero worship. "I'm no savior," he told the survivors who saw him out. "I'm just a man who happened to wake up at the right time. You don't need a leader. You need to remember what it means to stand together." So he formed the Council of Restoration, a circle of scholars, builders, and teachers. Their mission was not conquest, but preservation. To gather the fragments of lost history, pass them on. He taught them what the old world had forgotten, that progress without empathy was just another kind of tyranny. Every lesson he gave carried the weight of what had been lost, and what could never be repeated. At night, when the city grew quiet, Chris often walked to the river. The water still reflected the lights of human life, trembling, but real. Sometimes he thought of Lena, her voice carried faintly on the wind. "Don't stop trying," she had said, and he hadn't. But now, as the world stirred awake, he wondered if his purpose had always been simpler, not to restore what was, but to make sure humanity learned how to begin again. He felt the ache of centuries in his bones, the loneliness of being a man displaced by time. Everyone he had known was long gone. The language had shifted, the music changed, the skyline reborn. And yet, in the laughter of children chasing each other through rebuilt streets, he heard echoes of a future that felt familiar. Hope had found its rhythm again. One morning, as the sky blushed with gold, Chris climbed the hill overlooking the ruins of the old Valar citadel. The air smelled of earth and ozone, of rain after ruin. Below him, the people of the new world stirred, farmers trending soil where glass once lay, engineers rebuilding power stations with human hands. The hum of renewal filled the horizon. He closed his eyes, letting the warmth of the rising sun touch his face. The past was behind him, frozen, preserved, a monument to both folly and resilience. The present was all that remained, alive and pulsing. "I was never meant to lead," he whispered, voice soft as the wind. "I just wanted to live." The breeze answered with silence, then with warmth. And as the first light of a new age spread across the sky, Chris smiled faintly. The age of the Unfrozen had begun, not an age of conquest or power, but of memory, mercy, and rebirth. Humanity walked forward once more, carrying with it the fire of the past, and the promise never to let it die again.